We are rolling. Hello everyone. I'm Kartik. I'm going to be giving a talk on how to suck at Indiedev for 8 years. It's a series. It's 8 years of my Indiedev career condensed into 5 goofs. The good, the bad, and the lessons. While I'm giving this talk, if you have a question burning in your mind, feel free to just drop it into the staged chat, and I'll look at them after the talk is over, but I'll also have a little bit of time at the end for questions if there are any questions. So let's talk about past 8 years of trying to accomplish the indie dream. So a little background on me, if you are not familiar with me or don't know my story from back to front. I started Finite Reflection Studios in 2016 after the Global Game Jam that year. That's us young folks after making that jam at SCAD Atlanta. And then about a year later, graduated from Georgia Tech with a bachelor's in computational media. Worked on a lot of student games. These are just the 5 student games that I led when I was in Indiedev, which is the game development club at Georgia Tech. After graduating, I started in QA at Cartoon Network, and while I was there, I was promoted to an associate producer. While I was also at Cartoon Network on the side, me and my studio, we developed and released Twin Cop and Containment. After that, I left for Tasty Pill, where I was a Unity developer, stayed there long enough to be promoted to a lead developer. And during my time there, I prototyped like at least 10 different games, most of which did not get released because the hyper-casual game industry is very brutal about how quickly they churn through prototypes and what they do and don't decide to release. But here's just a few clips I managed to grab of the few things I worked on, as well as one of the few games that was released, Work From Home 3D, which you can believe it was made, during the pandemic to tie into that. I also prototyped this like really extremely ambitious survival crafting game while I was there as well. A lot of games in the hyper casual game industry there. And after that, after getting a little bit burnt out on doing that for a little too long, I left and did full-time indie dev for Finite Reflection, the studio I started. And during that time, we made and released The Garden of the Wild Vines. After that, we'll talk about why, but I found another full-time job and worked at the Puzzle Society, where I helped launch around 8-ish web puzzle games. And then after that, left back for full-time indie dev, Finite Reflection, and currently working on Void Souls. So, we're going to take this chronologically. Start with the first groove, when I first started the studio, Delusions of Grandeur, in the spring of 2016. So, we had just won Best in Georgia at the Global Game Jam, and we were just an excited, passionate team. We had a lot of motivation coming out of the Global Game Jam, and our plan was that we were going to create a whole new game than the game that we had made at that jam to show at Siege 2016, which was going to be happening towards the end of that year. We thought, you know what, let's take this really wonderful game that we made for this jam, throw it all away, and make something new from scratch that's going to be even better than this thing. Yeah, we were super hyped. We were super excited. All 5 of us. Zach isn't in that image. This is when things started to not go so well. This is where the goofs began. This is why it's called Delusions of Grandeur. We were just so excited about this being, hey, we're college students. This is our first real thing that we're going to do outside of college. It's time to pick a studio name. We got to make sure it's a really good studio name, something that's going to stand the test of time. And boy, howdy, did we really planned a lot. We really thought way too hard about what the name of the studio was going to be. And kind of related to that, we thought way too hard about what this first game that we were going to make was going to be. We just had meeting after meeting where we were just really shooting for the stars. Having done game development at Georgia Tech in the club, I felt like I knew how to scope a project, but something about being this is our indie studio, we got this, we're starting a new thing, let's really plan it out like a real game studio. And we tried that for a very long time, and about 6-ish months, and Siege 2016 was right around the corner, and all we had to show for it was not very fun demo of a boss fight of what's supposed to be just I really couldn't even tell you what this game was gonna be. Some kind of really ambitious open world third person co-op RPG, I think. um, and the result of all this was that he did not die, but he did leave the team, and we are on good terms. It's not like this image makes it look really bad, but Dom just made the very healthy decision of saying, "Hey, I don't feel like I'm really vibing with this right now, and I'm gonna go do my own thing." And we parted on good terms, but it did sting a little bit, feeling like, wow, we really did not do what we set out to do. And yeah, I was feeling pretty bad, and I was like, cool, well, Siege is right around the corner. We won a free booth at this convention, and we're going to have nothing to show for it because we just all completely and utterly failed to make anything meaningful. Um, and so, what did we learn? Um, One evening, after I think I went to go see the Legend of Zelda Symphony concert, I was just driving home and feeling really like overwhelmed by all of this, and felt inspired by what it felt like to drive very late at night on a street lit by a couple of street lights. And so I prototyped that in just like an evening. As you can see, it's really not that complex of a game. It's just an infinite flying, go forward kind of game with a swoopy camera. Um, and we kind of immediately felt like this felt more like a game than whatever we were trying to do before. It was really like what I thought was a very obvious lesson in making something well scoped, but clearly I still had to learn my lesson. And we worked on it just a little bit more. And if we can go to the next slide, uh, by the time Siege rolled around, we actually had like a game, a thing that had a beginning, middle, and end. A thing with a main menu. That other prototype that we spent months and months on didn't even have a main menu. Something that had music, sound effects, all the stuff that you'd expect out of just a thing that you're going to show at a convention. Um, and yeah, I mean, it was not nearly as ambitious and cool as what we had originally planned, but it was something. And it was something for us to at least work on and not immediately give up on our indie dream before it even got started. Um, Go to the next slide. Okay. And there we were at Siege 2016, at the very first booth that we ever got to show a game at, and the very first time we ever printed business cards for ourselves, and the very first time that we took a game that we had worked on and brought it outside the confines of Georgia Tech's campus and showed it off to complete strangers and got feedback on it. So what did we learn through our first major goof? No one remembers your first game. Technically, even what we thought was going to be our first game wasn't our first game, because my first game, at least, were all the many student games I made in school. No one's going to remember your first game. It really doesn't matter what you make first as your studio. It really doesn't matter whether it's a success or a flop, because everyone only remembers your best and hopefully probably your last game. The other lesson learned from all this was progress begets motivation, which begets progress. It's a positive vicious cycle. If you are not making progress at the start, then it is very hard to stay motivated on a project. We were losing a lot of motivation, turning our wheels, whatever the metaphor is, on a game that we were trying to design while prototyping, while designing, and constantly not agreeing on anything, and that resulted in something that we couldn't finish, versus starting with a prototype that we could already identify as having a gameplay loop and using that as a springboard. And then, most importantly, you will fail, so fail fast, especially early on. I didn't think that I was early on in my career at that time. Graduating college, I thought I was like, oh, I've made so many student projects, and like I'm about to strike out into the industry. I must be like at the middle of my career or something. I don't really know what I thought, but I was definitely at the beginning of my career, and I'm actually really glad that our failure was all of 5-6 months, which was not a very long time to spend completely fumbling to make a game. just remember the Dunning-Kruger effect exists. I certainly, hindsight is 2020. Hindsight, I'm like, yeah, I was definitely riding the peak of Mount Stupid at that time. I think what I've also learned is that the Dunning-Kruger effect is a graph that repeats itself over time. You just keep finding yourself on new peaks and new valleys as you go along. But that was goof number one, Delusions of Grandeur. Goof number two, unknown unknowns, spring 2017. So we had just shown at Siege, and we had a lot of great momentum from that. People who had played the game said they really liked it. They said it had a really cool vibe. It had a prototype that we could actually send out to people and like just let them play without us having to hold their hand, which is a sign of a good prototype. It had a vibe, it had an aesthetic, it had mechanics, all the things you'd expect out of a game. Unfortunately, despite all that, we still really couldn't agree on what we were making. Was it like a really chill, vibey story-based game? Was it going to have multiplayer? Is it competitive or is it meditative? And then there went that momentum again. We once again couldn't follow through on a thing and ended up giving up on this. So we are 2 for 2 on failed releasing of a game after starting the studio. Thankfully, right as around we were giving up on that game, Global Game Jam 2017 happened, and at that jam, we managed to somehow capture lightning in a bottle twice and have yet another really good game jam where the game we felt we made at it was good. And going away from this jam, even though this one didn't win anything, we felt like it had like a clearer genre, a clearer structure for what the full thing might look like. And we kind of set this ahead of time. When we left that jam, we set it ahead of time. We were like, you know what? It's just going to be completely linear. It's just going to be like very independently mission based. It's just going to have a light narrative, and it's just a top-down shooter. We're not going to do RPG elements. Let's just like strip it back. Simple, scope down. We can do this. We still had a lot to learn. This was in the era of Steam Greenlight. Toon Cup was like one of the last few games to like barely squeak by at the end of the era of Steam Greenlight. Steam Direct, all things considered, is better because more people get to release things on Steam. But at the time, it was brand new. We had no idea what that meant. And also, even though we got through Steam Greenlight and we could access the Steam backend, we had no idea what to make of the Steam backend. How do we set up a game? Steam is asking us for like our tax identification number. It's asking us for evidence that we're a real organized company. We hadn't really done any of that. These were our unknown unknowns. I had to take a screenshot of this because posted in October of 2017, we had thought we were going to start and finish this game within a year, and it was getting to be the end of 2017. And so someone posted in our community, "Hey, is this still happening?" No, it was not. So this was delayed because we were just continually getting caught up on things that we didn't know we didn't know. So what did we learn? Account for your unknowns. I think that some people had been trying to tell us when we were working on this about things that we weren't ready to hear, or things that we weren't ready to realize we didn't know. You're always going to have unknowns. You always want to account for the fact that the next thing you're going to do, you're going to be in some amount of uncharted territory. And you have to just account for that. In our case, we should have planned better. We should have known, hey, we're about to release something on Steam, something that we've never done before. What makes us think that we're just going to like knock it out of the park on our first try? What makes us think that we're going to know exactly how to set up the Steam page and get it out there without ever having done it before? You'll always have unknowns because of two reasons. One, the industry is still young and constantly changing. Year after year, we keep seeing something new happen to the state of the industry that completely changes what everyone thinks they know for a fact. And in general, whether it's this industry or any other industry, there's just always more to learn. You're always going to have unknowns. And it's just worth keeping in mind this little graph of known knowns, known unknowns, unknown knowns, and unknown unknowns. Whenever you're trying to sort of plan for the future or plan for a project you're trying to finish, like, have you thought about what you don't know that you don't know? You obviously can't really know that, but you can try to think ahead a little bit about, okay, what have we not tried? What are the risks here with what we're trying? So how did we apply these lessons when we learned them at the time? Honestly, this was like very, very low point for me in terms of my career because this was our track record so far. Two canceled games and a delayed game that we weren't sure if we were ever going to finish. But we decided, looks like I cut myself off with a webcam there, but we decided to just make a game that we literally can't fail to finish. Once again, we are going to scope down. Enter containment. This game, we scoped it out. We actually like scoped the amount of game we were going to make based off of the price point. We decided we're just going to make a $2 game. That was like how we decided how much to put into this game. We set the launch date in advance. We just decided February 9th, this is the day the game launches no matter what. We're not pushing this for any reason. And because of that, we had to cut content near release. Despite how very, very simple of a game this was, we still had to cut content to hit that release date. But we did it. We released it. There's the graph of all the sales, and there's how much money it made. The first game that we ever officially released on Steam. And then, because we did that, we returned to Twin Cop. And now that we had an experience of showing of releasing a game, we were able to take Twin Cop the distance. We took it to 16 shows. We took it to 3 DreamHacks, 2 MomoCons, 2 Terminuses, GDC, 2 Indie Bits, Indie Mega Show, 2 Southern Fried Game Room Expos, a Playthrough Rally, Orlando IX, and a PAX West. There was this one time that Dr. Disrespect was across the booth from us at one of the DreamHacks. This is us at the IGF booth at GDC. This is me dead at PAX West. This was the first time that we ever had any of our games covered by a content creator, so that was cool. Super Bunny Hop made a really nice video about it. And we won a decent amount of awards for it, too. And none of this would have been possible had we not just overcome all of our unknown unknowns with our first game. And then just over a year later, we finally released it. 2 years later than we originally planned to, 2017 to 2019, but still, we released it. I actually finished this game on a train from Chicago to San Francisco on a thing called Train Jam, which unfortunately does not exist anymore, but... and we released it on consoles as well. We got some coverage, which was pretty cool. We turned our unknown unknowns into known knowns and felt like we were on top of the world. We can do anything. We got this. Which brings us to goof number 3. You can do anything. Winter of 2019. So we were doing pretty well at this time. We had landed some porting gigs, we had landed some contract work, and we had a lot of prototypes for what we were doing next. You know, we were like confident. We had just released 2 games. Sure, neither of them had made a whole lot of money, not enough for us to start paying ourselves full time by any means, but we had made games. We can just keep making games and eventually we'll be rich. That's how that works, right? 2020 is going to be our year. Absolutely nothing can possibly get in our way. We got lore documents. We got like tons of documents. We have a really like pretty prototype that's got a first-person shooter because we were all playing a bunch of first-person shooters at the time. We're like, yeah, we're just going to make a first-person shooter because that's what everyone wants, right? Not quite. We ended up canceling almost every thing that we were working on at the time because something happened in 2020. I can't remember exactly what it was, but either way, something happened in 2020 that really took a lot out of a lot of us. We did take one of the games that we prototyped, Smashball Blitz, to DreamHack and felt like this was going to be our next game. It had, as you can see, we had a whole booth for it. We had tons of like printed material for it. And we had a pretty solid prototype of it as well. But just like Nightweaver, we were just kind of unsure about what kind of game it was, who the game was for, and why we were making it outside of just an obligation to make our next game and try to make it quick. We also got a bit of a false positive at DreamHack, where we kind of learned the hard lesson that people come to shows like DreamHack to have a good time, and they're not going to tell you that they don't like your game to your face. Not to say that the game was bad, but in hindsight, yeah, the game wasn't as cohesive or as tightly focused as what we wanted to be making. We felt like it was just lacking a little bit of soul. We didn't really know, again, who or what we were making this game for. The one good thing that came out of this is that the prototype for this game ended up being bought by coolmathgames.com, so you can play the prototype for this on coolmathgames.com. But it was canceled as well. So what did we learn from this era of Finite Reflection Studios? Just because you can do anything doesn't mean you should do everything. Know your limitations. We really, once again, overextended ourselves trying to make something that we couldn't afford to make, which is a first-person shooter. We don't really have anyone on the team that had spent enough time doing 3D art or 3D level design to be able to do a game like that. Set timelines. The other thing that we were doing during this time was just starting prototypes, and then prototypes were bleeding into other prototypes, and we were just kind of project hopping, and nothing was ever really getting done, and we were never really like finishing anything. Kind of similar to that, Kill Your Darlings, like it can be really painful to ever decide that you're just going to stop a project for any reason. But kind of like the very first lesson that we learned from the first goof, fail fast, fail often. The longer you drag on a project that you and your team are not loving, the longer you're just going to regret that time wasted in the end. It's okay. You learn what you wanted to learn from it, and if you're not having fun working on it, what are you doing? So the outcome of this is that, once again, during a game jam, we made a prototype, and we were like, this is cute. And once again, we can see from the start what the scope of this is going to be. Like, it's just a platformer where you climb towers, and you do so by cutting flowers. That's it. And we were able to take that from a jam to a finished thing. Once again, scoping down. Once again, knowing the scope of the game from the start and knowing that we can do it in a timely manner. And this was, again, during the pandemic and during my time at the Hyper Casual Game Studio, where I was getting a little bit burnt out. And I decided to quit my day job and just spend a year dedicated to this, floating on savings, and maybe I'll be able to pay rent after this, maybe I won't, but I knew I had to give it a shot. So I did, and I think it had kind of our best critical reception yet out of any game that we released. It was nominated for an Indiedev and a GLAD Award, which is really cool, and we released it on all platforms. Which brings us to goof number 4, the Indiepocalypse. So again, as I mentioned, Garden of Wildvines, we were actually really happy with this. We got onto a lot of people's best game of the year lists. We got onto a bunch of like hidden gem lists. We're nominated for a GLAD Award alongside these games, which is crazy. Unfortunately, it did not pay nearly enough for me to be able to pay rent. And part of it was because of this graph that I captured here. This is from 2019, so I'm sure the state has changed since then. But this graph compares the number of games released per genre versus the amount, the median revenue of each genre. And you can see 2D platformers is the third least revenue generating game on this graph. Again, take every graph with a grain of salt, but there is some truth to this. And it's also way overrepresented on this end of the graph. A lot of people are making 2D platformers, and not a lot of them, there's not a lot of money to go around in that, unless you're Nintendo or unless you're making Celeste. And this actually taught us the wrong lesson. We started to believe in the Indiepocalypse. We started to think like, oh no, there's too many games out there. We need to make something that like really stands out. And we started looking at graphs like the one I just showed and really like overemphasizing the importance of like picking the right genre and picking something that really like fits a certain, I don't know, virality. We did particularly well in a Ludum Dare, where our game came 20th overall out of 2,200, and decided to try to turn that game into a multiplayer, procedurally generated, first-person shooter roguelike. It's like we haven't learned anything. It's like we just keep making the same mistakes every single time, right? And I mean, based off this video, like I'm still really proud of what we managed to accomplish. And me and the team, I think Larry in the chat there. Like, yeah, we're really happy with what we worked on here, and it was fun. But yeah, gosh darn it, it was overscoped again. And also, again, we were designing from a very like marketing first perspective, which is just not how we have fun in game design. Um, so once again, canceled project. Um, so what did we learn from all this? Scope, scope, scope. We are how many years? 5 years into my game dev career so far, and I'm still not learned how to scope properly. The other lesson was there is no indie apocalypse. Not in the way that I think I see a lot of people talk about it on Twitter. This is entirely my opinion, so feel free to take it with many grains of salt. But I don't believe the problem is that there's too many indie games. The problem is that not everyone is making games designed to sell. And that's okay. Not everyone should be making games that are designed to sell. Not everyone should be focusing on just trying to make tons of money, because then we wouldn't have a ton of really cool games. Um, and yeah, I mean, kind of related to that, no one can predict success. Just some more graphs. Most of these graphs, by the way, are from a website called How to Market a Game by Chris Zukowski. Highly recommend checking out that website if you're interested in data like this. Very, very few games make a decent amount of sales, and that's, again, not because there's just too many games. It's just that people are very strict about what games they spend their money on, and sometimes that's just not your game, and that's just life. Um, which brings us to the most recent goof. To really bookend from the first goof, Delusions of Insignificance, aka letting Imposter Syndrome win as recent as fall of 2022. So, finally, after much strife of trying to figure out what our studio's next game was going to be, what we were going to work on next, I decided to just kill expectations of myself. Just have fun making something. That's why I like got into making games to begin with. I have a full-time job at this point. I went back to go work with someone who I used to work with before, now at a new company called the Puzzle Society, and that was supporting me financially, so I didn't have to worry about rent anymore. And that let me kind of relax a little bit, learn and grow from my experiences. Of course, because I can't learn my lesson, I was playing a lot of Elden Ring. I wanted to make Elden Ring. Um, I kind of learned my lesson here. I knew I couldn't make Elden Ring, so I didn't try to make Elden Ring. Unless I tried to make Elden Ring, but like you're a triangle, and it's really dark, and I don't have to do a whole lot of art, and it's really simple. Um, this is where the delusions of insignificance started setting in. Because of all these lessons that I've learned, because of all these goofs, I think I'd learned maybe a little bit too much humility. Um, I was like, this is a triangle, and it's got a sword, and it's like super dark, and it has no art. There's no way anyone's really gonna want to play this, right? These are just my friends. They're just being nice. They just like want to tell me how good of a thing I've made. And we decided, you know what? We're just gonna release this game for free on itch. No one's gonna want to play this. Um, it turns out people really wanted to play this game. People really wanted to play this game. Most importantly, Iron Pineapple covered it to the tune of 2.5 million views, which was insane. And almost exclusively because of this video, we were reached out to by a publisher who we've been working with ever since, and we had to post this announcement. We genuinely did not know what to expect when we released this, aside from the fact that all of our friends were telling us, "Hey, you've made something really cool here. You should sell this." Um, so what was the bad here, right? Like, why did it matter that we had these illusions of insignificance? We really, really shot ourselves in the foot with publisher negotiations. We were again, we put this thing out for free, and now we've had to make an entirely new Steam page so that we can actually sell this game. And along with that, like, it's hard to negotiate with people asking them to give you money for something when you've already put out public announcements saying, "Hey, we're giving this weird small thing away for free," and everybody's like, "Great. How are you planning on making money on this?" Um, so it caused a decent number of problems, most of which I can't really go into, but lessons were learned. Um, I think where I stand now on this, aim for success, plan for failure. It never benefits you to just not even bother aiming for success. Just shoot your shot. The worst that can happen is that you fail, and as long as you haven't bet your house on your failure, that should be okay. And I do genuinely feel like we got really lucky in a lot of regards with this game and with where we are with this game. But I think what I feel like I've learned about luck in my career is that luck is just attempts over time. The more attempts, the more times you go to bat, the more likely you are to get lucky. Some kind of highlights of this luck, like we got Pirate Software to stream the game for us. At one point, we had like 12,000 people watching live while he and I chatted on Discord. We've been covered by PC Gamer, Rock Paper Shotgun, so on and so forth. We had a huge booth at Insomnia in the UK. Very cool photo wall thing. And then as of today, I discovered that we got like a double spread in Edge magazine, which was crazy. All of this would not have happened if we had just left it as a free thing because we thought no one would want to play our game. And so I'll quickly get through this because I feel like I'm going a little over than I wanted to, but quick timeline of my career so far. We've had a lot more canceled and delayed games than we've had releases. But the point is, despite sucking at indie dev for 8 years, we haven't given up, and we're still trying. So just a summary of goofs. We started out with Delusions of Grandeur, thinking we are going to absolutely kill it in this industry, so we got to make sure we pick a really good name. We got to make sure that our first game absolutely kicks butt and that everyone's going to remember this. We learned that there are a lot of things that you don't know, and you can't expect to succeed at something you've never tried before. We learned not to try anything just because you can do anything. We learned the indie apocalypse does not exist, and that you just have to either learn how to make a game that sells well, which I don't think exists, or just make games for fun and hope that they do well. And we learned to not shoot yourself in the foot and to have at least a baseline amount of faith in your own abilities. And that brings us to the end of the presentation, which brings us to time for questions. And looks like we have our first one. Why did we decide to go with a publisher? Money. Honestly, I mean, the dream from when we started this studio from the beginning was we wanted to make this a company that people can pay themselves full time for. You need money to do that, and that combined with the fact that the publisher offered us a deal that we felt was fair and benefited us as a team, we just decided to go with it. It's also very, very rare that you get approached by a publisher. More often than not, you have to go around and pitch to tons and tons of publishers and then hope that you get one good bite. The fact that one had approached us and then I went to GDC and met with them in person, I got very good vibes from them, and we decided to take a chance. And so far, it has really, really worked out. For Twin Cap with all the events and shows, seems like it would get pricey. Yep. We're getting a return on investment, just mainly going for fun. Honestly, that should have been a lesson on its own. Yes, it got pricey. No, we did not get a return on the investment. That in hindsight, we've been taking games to less and less shows and spending less and less at each show that we go to. Where we are right now in our career, we've decided, like, because we've been to all these shows, we now have like a baseline understanding of like what kind of audience to expect at each show. For instance, we've always had fun going and showing at MomoCon. One thing I've personally learned about MomoCon is that because it is a much broader conference that appeals to a much wider audience, you don't get as focused and as frequent players as you get at, say, DreamHack, or even better, even best, PAX. PAX is like probably the best return on investment that you'll get for going to a show, because it is people who go specifically to play games, see cool new games that are unreleased, and that's where you tend to get the most people that are actually customers of the indie marketplace. Places like MomoCon, places like DragonCon, you'll meet a lot of people, but you'd be surprised how many gamers out there that just don't even realize how many games are out there in the indie space. So yeah, that's in terms of going to events, I'd say If it's free, if you don't have to pay for the booth, just go. There's literally no downside aside from the cost of any decorations you bring to the booth. But if it costs for a booth, just be conscious about like where you are in the project. Are you already selling units, and are you trying to go and sell units at this convention? Do you have a plan for that? Um, or are you just trying to get wish lists? Even then, be conscious. Is your audience going to be at this thing? Um, yeah. Another question: how difficult is it to port to console? How does that work? It's something interesting, never touched in yet. So porting to a console is something when we finished Twin Cop, we decided that we wanted to get it onto every console that we could, because it was just a very cool thing that we wanted to be able to say, yeah, our game's on Xbox. Like it's just a milestone that we wanted to hit. We When I say we, I mean Eric on my team decided he really wanted to learn how to do this, and we decided as a team that we were going to try to turn that into a secondary revenue stream for the company, which has worked to varying results of success. Um, we've been able to help a decent number of other indie studios get their games onto other platforms, because specifically Eric on our team spent a lot of time learning the process of porting, and and yeah, like Ankit said in chat just now, it can be very annoying. So I'm honestly just really grateful that Eric wanted to do it and did such a good job of it, and because of that, we were able to offer our services to other studios to help port their Unity games to other consoles as well. But it does take a lot of time, so if you're not ready to commit to the time that it's going to take, it's not that well, sorry, you have to buy your own dev kits if you're doing anything but Xbox. Um, but it can be expensive in that regard. But the real resource sink here is time and sanity. I don't know how Eric didn't go insane doing this, because anytime he told me what he's working on, even right now, we're kind of getting a head start on porting Void Souls, and the things he's already fixing on consoles, I'm just like, it hurts my brain whenever we have to fix bugs on that, because it's ridiculous. Michael, will we go to fewer shows with Void Souls than do with Twin Cop at a different spread? Yeah, we're gonna just generally go to fewer. We as a team, and me particularly, I am just more busy than I have been before on our team and in general, so I don't have as much time to dedicate to setting up booths and going to convention stuff. But anytime that there's a free show we can go to nearby, or a show that we feel like our audience is going to be at, which is most notably Southern Fried, Game Room Expo, and DreamHack, those are the ones that are almost absolutely for sure we're going to go. We're thinking about potentially putting some money towards a PAX West or a PAX East show after release when we're actually selling units. But other than that, compared to what we did with Twin Cop, we're definitely not going to go to as many shows as we took that. It's also worth noting there aren't as many shows now as there were then. That was an era at which a lot of people were trying to get into the show running business, so there were just like new shows popping up constantly, and that was both a good and a bad thing, because not all the shows knew how to run themselves, and um, yeah, there's not as many shows now to go to. Do opportunities in the gaming industry feel like something that needs to be taken as quickly as possible, or does it feel like things can often come back around later? I think it's kind of vague in terms of like when you say opportunities. If you're talking about AAA opportunities, I'd say in general, right now the gaming industry is certainly in turmoil, and I think a lot of people far smarter than I have said far better things about why that is and what's going to happen as a result of all that. I would say don't take an opportunity just because it's there if it's going to severely devalue your labor. Don't take an opportunity just because it's at a company with a big name, unless you can really afford the financial and physical and emotional toil that might take on you. Um, I think that you can learn from almost any opportunity if you use it wisely, which is to say, it doesn't have to be in the game industry. Um, I didn't know I wanted to be a producer or a project manager, but a lot of the full-time jobs I've had have been full-time and project manager, have been producer and project manager roles, and I've inadvertently learned a lot from that. And I've also had good jobs that have allowed me to do indie stuff on the side, and that's also been really important in my career. And I'll do a quick follow up on your question. I have a ton of trouble creating game concepts. I'm self conscious replicating other games. Um, how much do you think I should care about having super original concepts? I think if you and I were given the exact same game design document and wanted and started to prototype a game based off of a design document, even if we were given the exact same art assets, our games would turn out extremely different. So I'd say, very short answer, don't worry about it. Um, I think it's actually better to start with something that is familiar, um, both for your own sake and for if you're trying to sell a game for the player's sake, because familiarity is a great way to get people through the door. If someone's coming at your game and they have never seen anything like it before, which in my opinion is one of the things that hurt us with Gardener and the Wildvines, um, it can be a little bit intimidating for someone to decide how much money they want to drop on something that they've never ever seen before. Um, so yeah, I'd say don't worry about it. Just start with something that's familiar. As you work on it, you're going to come up with your own spin on it anyway because you are, as a creative, going to get bored of just doing what someone else has done, and you will have something cool by the end of it. Yoon, what lessons from your full-time gigs carried over into your indie endeavors? Almost everything. All my project manager roles, I've learned about how to just finish projects. I've learned a lot about budgeting. I've learned a lot about managing teams. And obviously, when I was a Unity developer at Tasty Pill, I learned a lot from then with just debugging issues on games. Because when I was a lead developer there, I was helping a bunch of other developers with their stuff as well, and so I feel like I got really immersed in the wide range of bugs and mistakes and things that can happen inside of Unity projects. So I'd say all of them, and I don't think that they even need to be game industry jobs for you to learn a lot from them. For the games you canceled, what elements were you able to reuse, and how did you approach reusability? Yes, we reused. We reused a decent bit. I don't think it was until we finished Twin Cop that we realized, with how many games we were starting and canceling, that we should start keeping a backlog of code that we write a lot. So Eric started maintaining a finite reflection repo, which basically anytime we finish a game or anytime we're about to finish a game and we realize, wow, this thing seems like it's not specific to this game and we may want to do it again. For instance, every game, we want every one of our games to have localization in it. So that's just like a system that we pulled out of Twin Cop that we have been using since then. So I'd say if you're able to, do it. If you're not able to, it's not a big deal. Just everything that you start and finish, whether you fail to finish it or if you actually release it, as long as you like put it down and move on from it, you're gonna learn from it and you're gonna get faster at whatever it is you're trying to do, inevitably. So. Yeah, what methods proved to be really effective? Testing, and fleshing out new game concepts. I hit a bit of a wall in my personal project, trying to find where/how I should approach my project to gain some progress. Um, in my experience, usually if you're hitting a wall like that, it's because your scope is too big, or you're building something that is not based off of something else, kind of going back to that question from earlier. Um, Again, like it's very tempting to try to make something like really unique and really groundbreaking, but um, you got to find a balance between that and making something that is at least baseline familiar to other people. The other thing is playtesting. Bring whatever it is you're working on to any of the IRL meetups, or just post in the general chat of this community and say, hey, I'm working on something. Would anyone want to playtest it? And then when they're playtesting, do your best not to say anything and just watch them play. If they don't know how to progress past the main menu, that's what you should be focusing on. If they get stuck after the main menu and just don't know what they're supposed to do in the main game, That's what you should be focusing on. Because at the end of the day, most people's goals are to just put the game into a stranger's hands and let them play without being told what to do. Um, but so the best way to prepare yourself for that is to put the game into someone else's hands. Often developers' hands are very capable hands because they know what you're looking for in terms of feedback, and you can just give them the thing and say, "Hey, you just play. I'm just going to sit here and watch," and I think you'll learn a lot from that. Gonna give it another minute and see if anyone else has any last minute burning questions. I see a few more people typing. Favorite engine? Most used engine is Unity. I have done a few jams in Godot now, and I think that you should pick your engine depending on the game that you're trying to make. If you're trying to make a third-person action game, go ahead, use Unreal. If you're trying to make a 2D side-scroller, maybe use Godot. Oh boy, more people are typing. Guess we're still doing this. Yeah, if you have a VR project, talk to Sean. I'm volunteering Sean to help you. Several people are typing. SeanTheBomb.com will probably be able to help you test. Yeah. All right. In the interest of still getting into the online meetup that we still want to have after this, I'm going to stop recording